believe I can't use that hexagons are better than squares. Dave, did you plug the sound back in? They've got a theme tune.
And now, please welcome the host of Rockbusters, Mark.
So they have a theme tune and they also have a game show. Now obviously there is celebrity squares, but that's shit. Remember, you can't say the word shit over there. I'm going to say to you that very, very fundamentally I believe that learning is two things. I believe that it is social, as we say up here. And that is a picture of some of our girls doing a secret map from memory or a secret picture. And I also believe that fundamentally learning is about making connections. And I have done this presentation before, and I know a few people in the audience have seen it before. I am going to make exactly the same joke, so just bear with me. So, well, I want them to sound spontaneous. So it's about making connections, and this is actually a picture of my synapses that I took with my iPhone, because there's an app for that. But I am going to talk to you very, very briefly about the solo taxonomy. As I have turned off the timer, I could go on a little while. But the solo taxonomy, from what I understand of it, and I am still learning, and the person who first got me thinking about the solo taxonomy was Darren Mead. Amongst that, bird watching and beer are Darren's main passions. And for me, this is how I've interpreted it. So it's about assessment. It's about assessing learning. It's about assessing those connections, which I think learning is. The solo taxonomy stands for the structure of observed learning outcomes. Oh, hello. And it starts at being pre-structural. So in any amount of learning, it doesn't matter what you are learning, at some point you haven't learned it. So you haven't got any structures, you haven't got any understanding. So next time Ofsted come in, when you have a really, really bad lesson and they give you an unsatisfactory, you just say, no, it was pre-structural. And then you learn one thing, you just learn a bit about what I want you to learn about. And I'll give you a French example in a moment. So you learn one bit, and that is a unistructural in terms of solo taxonomy, so you've learned one thing. And then multistructural is you start to learn a few things. So if you like, it's going from I've got one brick to I've got a pile of bricks. But what I haven't done yet is to make relationships between my learning. So I haven't connected, which I think is fundamental learning. I haven't made those connections yet. So when we get to the relational stages, I've learned lots of things and I've started to connect them together. And then finally, the extended abstract stage, in a sense the same as Naomi, I really struggle with this in languages in particular. And that is the stage where the students are confident enough to be able to hypothesize and to extrapolate and say, well, actually, if this happens here, then maybe this is going to happen here. And I think I've got an example of how we've done it successfully in languages so far, but it is one that I struggle with. If I can get the kids to make really a relational understanding in terms of learning languages and learning grammar in particular, I'm very, very happy. So, how do I actually see inside their brains? Because that is the thing that Darren mentioned as well. Again, this whole idea of how do you actually visibly see learning. And there is a piece of... I can't make the mouse right now. There we go. Oh no. There are a number of these books. I don't know if anyone's used them. It's Thinking Through Geography, Thinking Through History, Thinking Through RE. And they came out of the University of Newcastle Centre for Thinking, something like that. I can't remember what it's called now. But it was David Leet who ran it about 10 or 11 years ago. And as an NQT, I worked with Cheryl and Maylin on the Thinking Through Languages book. And the reason I bring this up is because it had mysteries in it. Everybody use mysteries? So you get a question, and then you get lots of square cards, and you kind of have to answer that question. It's a nice kinesthetic activity, and it's all about moving bits of card around to get an answer. And David Lee and Adam, I forgot his name now, Nichols from Durham University, they wrote a piece called Brains on the Table, Diagnostic Informative Assessment Through Observation, which I did look for, and it's 45 quid online, so just go to your library and get it or photocopy it. And what they did was they went down and they did loads and loads of observations of these mysteries happening. And they said it was fantastic because there's almost a language of learning when you were doing a kinesthetic activity. So they said when kids were doing these mysteries with all these cards in front of them, they would make general points and they would wave their hand over the cards. And if they were taking a point specifically, they would point at the card they were talking about. And if they were trying to make connections, they would point at the card and they would use their hands to point at where the connection was going. And in a sense, it was just showing you how they were making these connections and how they were thinking. And it is unfailingly worked that there's almost this universal sign language around using mysteries. So anyway, I love mysteries. I love the idea of demonstrating learning kinesthetically and physically. And then Damien Clark, who if you are on Twitter, is at Clark099, had like a stroke of genius. And that stroke of genius was that he used hexagonal cards. I repeat, he used hexagonal cards, which means that going from 4 sides, we have 6 sides. And what that meant straight away is this example here is whether or not they should build a dam in the Amazon. And what it meant was rather than just having connections going in long ways and going from spectrums of, oh, they definitely shouldn't to this says they definitely should, all of a sudden they were going off in different directions and they were able to connect things in different ways rather than a very linear way, which works with those square card mysteries. So having these for me was like a revelation. So I ran away and I made some for year 13. And year 13 French, these are all, we got 2 French teachers. Any other French teachers? Oh, 3 or 4, yes, Fergus. And this is reasonably high level language, and it all kind of picks up on different points that I want to make sure they know. So I actually team taught this with Abby in my department, and we gave them the cards, and they kind of the year 13 kind of looked at them and said like, "What's this, mate? What are you doing?" And just sort of said it and hated it. Then one group started to think, well, we asked them some sort of metacognitively challenging questions. Could you put these things together? Could you put those things together? And they started to make these connections. And it worked really, really well. They started to say, well, this is to do with gender, this is to do with number, this is to do with verb tense, this is to do with subjunctive, all those kind of things, which I really wanted them to say, but it was the first time I'd ever holistically had them put everything together. And when one group actually did this, they stuck those on a piece of paper and they started writing the connections between them. So they kind of started to develop a mind map, saying, well, this is that, and these are these links, and these are those things. Now, I have to be really honest, because the other group absolutely hated it. So there was a group of probably one of the brightest kids we've got in the school. She absolutely hated this, because she said, in my mind, I'm very happy knowing what I know, and I don't want to see those connections between them. And it was really interesting, because not only she got really upset about it, and she said, I don't want to know this. And she said, you're shaking my foundations now. So what I think is that maybe at the end of year 13 was a bit late. So maybe because this was a little bit earlier, rather than shaking the foundations. So when the results plummet this year, you can tie it down to this activity. So Kirsten Harris hated it. I hate it. And she was pretty down about it. Never mind. Anyway, so that worked very well for me and for some of the kids, and not very well for Kirsten. But then what happened was, just to show you that this can go from year 13, is one of my colleagues in Ireland, who's on Twitter, Amanda, she took it and she did it with the year 7 Spanish activity, so beginner's Spanish. And again, the kids were making those connections and giving them the opportunity to make holistic connections work really, really well for us. So, to finish off with, further reading, I know this has already been talked about, is Hooked on Thinking. If you're interested in the social taxonomy, it's a New Zealand-based website, absolutely brilliant. Invisiblelearning.blogspot.com is Damien's blog. Evidence-Based Teaching by Jeff Petty, there's a section there about soil taxonomy if you're interested in that. Anything by Professor David Lee is great. If you want to follow somebody who knows all about soil taxonomy, it's at Darren Mead, and at Hooked on Thinking on Twitter as well, if you would like to do that. And that is me finished, and you now free to go and have some more beautiful food. Some lovely, thank you very much. So, food's out there, drinks are out there. Colin, you're going to go to the biome, I think you said, didn't we? Paul, you're going to go to the Science Learn Plaza in about 5 minutes for your conversation. So we'll start in about 5 minutes. If you want to help yourself with as much food and drink as you like, please, the house will go and enjoy the break. We'll be back in about 30